devotional service. Thus, he gradually became unaffected by the false ego of material identity and became free from material affection. Undisturbed, equal to everyone, and without duality, he could indeed see himself also. His mind was turned inward and was perfectly calm, like an ocean unagitated by waves. He thus became liberated from conditioned life and became self-situated in transcendental devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, the omniscient Supersoul within everyone. 46. He began to see that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is seated in everyone's heart, and that everyone is existing on him because he is the Supersoul of everyone. In the final verse, freed from all hatred and desire, Kapila Muni, being equal to everyone, became, because of discharging uncontaminated devotional service, ultimately attained the path back to Godhead. A simple answer of why he went back to the forest was to set an example, because he was already there. But he is setting an example for others. So we're going to be discussing chapter 25, Glories of Devotional Service. Sri Shaunaka said, so now it's back to Shaunaka and Sutta having a discussion as it starts in Canto 1, and then it's Shukadeva speaking to Maharaj Parikshit about a conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. It's a story within a story within a story, but it's quite okay. Shaunaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Atma Pragyaptaye indicate that the Lord descends for the benefit of the human race to give transcendental knowledge. Material necessities are quite sufficiently provided for in the Vedic knowledge, which offers a program for good living conditions and gradual elevation to the platform of goodness. In the mode of goodness, one's knowledge expands. On the platform of passion, there's no knowledge, for passion is simply an impetus to enjoy material benefits. On the platform of ignorance, there's no knowledge and no enjoyment, but simply life amongst almost like that of animals. Paragraph. The Vedas are meant to elevate one from the mode of ignorance to the platform of goodness. When one is situated in the mode of goodness, he is able to understand knowledge of the self, or transcendental knowledge. This knowledge cannot be appreciated by any ordinary man, therefore, since a disciplic succession is required, this knowledge is expounded either by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself or by his bona fide devotee. Shaunaka Muni also states here that Kapila, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took birth, or appeared, simply to appreciate and disseminate transcendental knowledge. Simply to understand that one is not matter but spirit soul, aham brahmasmi, I am by nature Brahman, is not sufficient knowledge for understanding the self and his activities. One must be situated in the activities of Brahman. Knowledge of those activities is explained by the Supreme Personality Godhead himself. Such transcendental knowledge can be appreciated in human society, but not in animal society, as clearly indicated here by the word nrinam, or for the human beings. Human beings are meant for regulated life. By nature, there is regulation in animal life also, but that is not the regulative life as described in the scriptures or by the authorities. Human life is regulated life, not animal life. In regulated life only can one understand transcendental knowledge. Prabhupada is mentioning of the car ride from the airport. Prabhupada is very consistent because the Vedas are very consistent in presenting the spectrum of what the Vedas offer. What the Vedas offer, at the pinnacle, at the apex, at the top, is to know Krishna. Vedais desire vayar aham eva vedyo. Krishna is saying aham. The purpose of the Vedas is to know me, or to know Krishna. And then there's many steps in between. As Prabhupada is writing here in this purport, material necessities are quite sufficiently provided for in the Vedic knowledge. Now, material necessities provided for in the Vedic knowledge is by performance of sacrifice. By performance of sacrifice, necessities of life are provided. Now, supposing somebody isn't a follower of the Vedas, what about their necessities of life? Their necessities of life are provided in a different way. Necessities of eating and sleeping and mating, defending, as indicated in the mode of ignorance. Animals also are provided their necessities. And human beings in the mode of ignorance that have nothing to do with the Vedas, they also are provided their necessities. But with the lack of sacrifice, then what happens from the human form of life, when there's a lack of sacrifice, then necessities supply starts to shrink. Material nature starts to shrink the supply of necessities. For the animals, so animals are dependent upon the human beings performing sacrifice. Or if the human beings are performing the opposite of sacrifice, but a series of sinful activities, nature restricts and the animals are also suffering. So when the human being is doing its proper thing, following of the Vedas, necessities are there. Now that's the understanding of those who are faithful to the Vedas, and those that aren't faithful, they can't understand any of this. And unfortunately, particularly in this age of Kali, the following of the Vedas is not so popular. Or, as explained, I was just on the flight on the way over from New Jersey. I'm preparing for the Chinese national holiday, and the topic is going to be Light of the Bhagavad, because it was for the people in Japan, or Oriental people understanding Vedic wisdom through lessons learned in nature, specifically the rainy season and following the rainy season, the autumn season. Chapter 20. So, there's a verse in that chapter that connects with what's here. There are persons who, like cranes that are on the perimeters of a lake during the rainy season, although it's very difficult, the cranes remain there anyways because they're attached to their home. Similarly, householders that are not in the elevated position but the dark will of family life position, they stay because they're attached, even though there's so many inconveniences. And what Prabhupada explains extensively is that here, it's Kapila Dev is coming to give transcendental knowledge. He doesn't use Kapila Dev because he uses instead sages and saints. And brahmanas. Their life is dedicated to dissemination of knowledge, because dissemination of knowledge provides at least an opportunity for people to be free from the unwanted restrictions that come from the lack of sacrifice. The attachment to the temporary results in people going further and further in this age of Kali, further and further from knowledge, or that which is uplifting and that which is nourishing for human nature and for material nature. So, the process of sacrifice helps elevate one to the position of goodness. And from that position of goodness, then knowledge of the Vedas becomes more accessible. And so the necessities of life are naturally supplied from the performance of sacrifice comes the supply of rain comes grain, and necessities of life for all animals and human beings comes from that supply of the rain. Those in the mode of passion, it's a nice sequence that he presents. They neglect the Vedas, and they neglect the means by which they can have transcendental knowledge. So their necessities may be there, but they don't have knowledge. It's a nice sequence. Passion is simply an impetus to enjoy material benefits. On the platform, there is no knowledge. Passion is simply an impetus to enjoy material benefits. On the platform of ignorance, there is no knowledge and no enjoyment. Simply life almost like that of animals. Or animals. Animal-like. This Light of the Bhagavad was written in 1961. These purports were written when? In the early 70s. By this time, Prabhupada's movement was really growing, very, very occupied with growing or managing the resources and directing and training and so forth and so on of his disciples. You want to come in? Welcome. Hare Krishna. Canto 3, Chapter 25, Kapila Dev's giving teachings on devotional service. That's the topic. Prabhupada introduced the topic of devotional service by explaining that Kapila Dev is an incarnation, and as an incarnation he came to disseminate knowledge of devotional service to the personality of Godhead. Although he's an incarnation, that means him, but he came to disseminate knowledge of devotional service. And the Vedas are compared sometimes to a desire tree. From a desire tree you can get anything. From a regular tree you can get one kind of fruit, if it's a fruit tree, and only in season. And a desire tree you can get any kind of fruit, at any time, in any quantity. The Vedas are compared to a desire tree, where whatever it is that living entities, conditioned living entities may desire, there's a process, there's a sacrifice process within the Vedas how to fulfill such and such desire. And that's we covered it a little bit. It's in Canto 2, Chapter 2. One who wants this goes to this demigod, one who wants that goes to that demigod, one who wants something else goes to another demigod or devi. And it's the desire tree. The process of sacrifice under the guidance of brahmanas is for the fulfillment of desires, necessities or otherwise, human desires. And by following the codes of the Vedas for fulfillment of desire, the impact, the effect, the byproduct is that mode of goodness increases. And with that mode of goodness increasing, the knowledge potential to receive transcendental knowledge or awaken transcendental knowledge grows. We just read in passion, it's increasing enjoyment of sense objects and practically no knowledge. And in mode of ignorance, it's neither knowledge nor material happiness. It's largely living like an animal. So the Vedas are meant, and the Kapila's coming and sages and sadhus coming is to give transcendental knowledge. Even when people are like, I don't want it. Knowing that people don't want it, great sages and saints, they want to give anyways. Not because of proselytizing or something like that, but for mitigating the miseries of material existence that are unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. Suffering is unnecessary, and happiness and knowledge is natural. It's the healthy condition. So, like a doctor may administer some medicine, even to an unwilling patient, knowing that it's good for the patient, or a parent may give some bitter medicine to their child, knowing that it's good for the child. It's in the same way, Kapila Dev, specifically here, and I was bringing in this, Prabhupada was expressing this in light of the Bhagavad in terms of sages and saints. They sacrifice everything for the good of everybody, for the purpose of disseminating transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge, knowing that that's going to give relief to the diseased condition of a conditioned soul, knowing that that's the effect. Even the recipients on the other end may not be just a willing participant. Somehow or other, making that effort. Sometimes Prabhupada would not lament, but openly indicate how many people are there in this city. Let's say he's in Los Angeles. And this is Prabhupada, not just some little person like us. How many people are there in Los Angeles, and how many people are coming to hear about Krishna? Manushanam Sahasreshu. Many, many thousands among men, maybe one is going to inquire. And of those who are inquiring, how many achieve perfection? Those who achieve perfection, how many know me in truth? So it's very rare. So he would, cite that very few people come. And that's even during Krishna's time, and then fast forward over Kali Yuga time, and the percentage shrinks. Nonetheless, the great acharyas, and here this is about Kapila Dev, this is Satya Yuga, to disseminate transcendental knowledge, and specifically knowledge of devotional service. Now, because largely the pyramids have a broader base than they have at the top, there's the large base of the mode of ignorance people. Therefore, to receive the benefit that the Vedas have, the necessity is there for a spiritual master. Since a disciplic succession is required, this knowledge is expounded either by the Supreme Personality Godhead himself, like Kapila, or by his bona fide devotee. Kapila Muni also states here that Kapila, the incarnation, took birth or appeared simply to appreciate and to disseminate transcendental knowledge. So there's the theoretical, there's the limited, and it starts theoretical. I'm not this body. Gosh, how many times, if you had a penny for every time Prabhupada spoke about you're not the body, you'd be a rich person. So there's the theoretical, aham brahmasmi, and then there's the practical, living your life that way. Now, in one sense, the life of devotional service is living our life that way. On the other hand, how much are we thinking we're not the body when we're engaging in devotional service? And then what to speak of, it's preliminary, the conceptual idea. The spirit soul that's part of the Supreme is part of knowledge, knowing who we are, and knowing that there's a relationship. What we heard in the last chapter, the end of the last chapter, was that Kapila Muni, Kapila Dev's father, not only saw the personality of Godhead within everyone's heart, but he saw himself also. And that means to see himself in the Supreme. He saw the relationship, the loving service relationship. He became perfect. Of course, different time, different place, different requirement for him than for us. But that's where the train is going. To become very focused in the course of all the various activities we do in our life, to become progressively more focused, more attached to Maya Sakta, to become asakti, or attached to Krishna in whatever we do. And then he could see Krishna and he could see himself. Now what does that mean? He could see Krishna, could see himself. Because the soul is too tiny. How tiny is the soul? It's Keshava Shatabhagasya. It's 1/10,000th this tip of a hair. I heard one lecture Prabhupada was saying, not just the end of your hair, but the tip of the hair, like a point. And how do you divide a point? But you divide a point into 100, and then divide that one of those 100s into 100. You can't see that. So how can he see himself? It's too tiny. Plus we don't have, so it's a spiritual seeing, because with these eyes, even with magnification, most powerful microscope, you can't see something so tiny. You can't see an atom, and the soul is within the atom. Supersoul and the soul are within every atom. You can't see. What does it mean to see himself? There's a spiritual identity, and with spiritual vision, one can see spiritual things. With material vision, you can't see spiritual things. Quite simple. With spiritual vision, you can see spiritual things. With material vision, you can't see spiritual things. And so it doesn't have the spiritual things or spiritual objects don't have boundaries like matter does. Matter is bound by space, like dimensions of something, and time. And spirit is not confined by either. Spirit is eternal, and spirit is not confined to some dimension. And even that, it's just to give some idea of the tininess, this comparison is given. Just like sometimes, maybe you've heard this one before, it says that the size of the Supersoul is 6 inches. You've heard that one? No? Or you've heard that it's the size of the thumb? Okay. So the explanation, size of the thumb, that's 6 inches. Or more or less. It's just, the explanation given by your acharyas is that's approximately the size of the heart. And so the size of the thumb is given, so you get the size of the heart, and the Supersouls within the heart. That's their explanation. It's not, in other words, it's not that there's some measurable dimension, because spiritually speaking, the Supersoul is simultaneously bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. Not only bigger than the biggest, but simultaneously both, which is not, it can't be. It's a contradiction. Materially speaking, it's a contradiction. Either you're big or small, you can't be simultaneously big and small. Simultaneously. And not only small, but smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. Because Mahavishnu is the source of all things, and his expansion, or the expansion of the expansion, is within the smallest thing, the atom, Paramanu. Who's seen an atom? And so the living entity and Paramatma are within that. At the same time as being the source of everything. So it's transcendental, defies human logic. It is not accessible by human senses. The mind, through expanding or stretching, even if you're a very creative person, or a good Muni, a good speculator, the mind cannot encompass transcendence, because the mind is material and transcendence is not material. That's easy conceptually to understand. So Kapila Muni, going back to Kapila Muni, saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the heart of every living being, and he saw himself. And the teaching that that his son, or incarnation of the Lord Kapila Deva, is going to give is also like that. So Shaunaka is the one speaking. He's speaking to Sutta Goswami, same as we find in first canto. It's continuing. I'm pausing because chronology is an interesting topic. Chronology is confusing. Puranic chronology is confusing because the Vyas, the compiler of the Vedas, He doesn't go to the trouble of putting things down chronologically. In one sense, because it's not so important. The essence is important, and chronology is not important. I spent a number of hours, some maybe 10 hours recently, going through some chronology issues. And I came across something that Rupa Goswami had written that was unconfusing, confused, and jumbled chronology. He made it clear, the chronology. But in many cases, our acharyas, and certainly the Puranas, they're quite logical, but not chronological. So it gets confusing if you have a binary processor mind like most of us have. The chronology doesn't fit. So rather than going into what that research was, because it's involved. Kapila Dev was already perfect. Excuse me, from the previous chapter. Kapila Muni was already perfect. And yet he left his son, Kapila Dev, to become perfect. And there's a description of the steps and stages that he underwent to become perfect. He was already perfect. So it's there to teach us by example. And now, the opening of chapter 25, it's all about devotional service. That's the title of the chapter, The Glories of Devotional Service, as Kapila Dev is going to teach Devahuti. I'll just give you a glimpse ahead. Because Kapila Muni has left home, knowing that there's an elder son who can look after his mother, or Kapila Muni's wife, he left. Went to the forest to complete his practices of devotional service in the forest. And Devahuti, his wife, is missing her husband, naturally. And she's with her son, who she knows to be the personality of Godhead. And she also knows that he's not going to stick around too long either. So she wants to know what's going to happen to me. Like, where's my shelter? I'm feeling these feelings, and where's my shelter? So that leads into the discussion of the chapter, where Kapila Dev says, very good question. And the short answer is, your shelter is at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, and access to the shelter of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead is made by accessing those who are at the shelter of the personality of Godhead. Madgatena antaratmana. By shelter of the personality of Godhead are those who are representing him, the sadhus. So he points to sadhu sangha, because through sadhu sangha, devotional service is awakened and perfection is achieved. So that's how the chapter flows and ends, with the glories of devotional service, through the medium of sadhu sangha. He's giving transcendental knowledge, but his transcendental knowledge, once again, is not just the theoretical, you're not this body. That's necessary, but it's insufficient. To conceptually accept you're not the body. Gosh, I was just hearing Prabhupada lecturing on chapter 4, verses 1 through 4 in the Bhagavad Gita. 50 classes so far just on those first 4 verses. 50 classes in different cities, of course. But he's expressing the fact, with some chagrin, that as this purport describes, people in the mode of ignorance, they don't understand it. They can't understand it. That there's a soul beyond this body. And that after the body is finished, the soul goes on. Now, some people can understand it, but many people can't understand it. And then he made reference to, a person who he recently had a discussion with, some professor, who was saying explicitly that all there is matter. Mechanistic science. All there is matter and the laws governing matter, and there's nothing else. When the body is finished, everything's finished. There isn't any consciousness other than the combination of chemicals or combinations of matter. And when combinations of matter break down, consciousness is gone, and that's it. Kaput. Prabhupada's expressing his frustration, and these people are leaders. He gave two examples. One was a professor, two professors, and one government leader. And they're leaders, but they're not leaders. Anyway, very, very frustrated when the influence of the age of Kali is such that even the most introductory, basic principle, it's hard for people to understand it. Or even if they say they understand it, they don't really understand it because they don't live by it. It's conceptual, or he makes the distinction, jnana, but no vijnana. They're not living that way, practically speaking, and therefore they don't have any practical realization. They're like this. They're not following the process of sacrifice given in the Vedas that elevate one to the standard of goodness, whereby, from which one can actually understand and live by spiritual teachings. So get back to Kapila Dev topic. He appeared in this world to disseminate spiritual knowledge for people who don't have it. And it's a challenge. I'm sure you've noticed. It's a challenge. But the personality of Godhead, Kapila, and again making reference to this light of the Bhagavad, sages and saints and brahmanas and persons that do have knowledge, they sacrifice everything for the welfare of human society to give this knowledge. And when this knowledge is received, to the degree this knowledge is received, all living entities benefit, not just the ones who received it. When human society makes that connection to higher consciousness and making sacrifice unto the Supreme, all living entities benefit. Because when that sacrifice is made, necessities of life are supplied. When that sacrifice is not made, necessities of life are restricted. It's very practical. The effect is very practical. Let's see if there's less. Human beings are meant for regulated life. By nature, there is regulation in animal life also, but that is not the regulative life as described in the scriptures by the authorities. Human life is regulated life, not animal life. In regulated life, only can one understand transcendental knowledge. Now, regulated life, just like the trees and plants, by seasons regulate what they do. But insects, fish, birds, animals, they have their regulation by nature's arrangement. So they're regulated, they're controlled or regulated by nature. In the human form of life, there's additional regulation that's imposed, and it's not that advancement means unregulated life. Advancement means more regulated life, voluntarily submitting oneself to the codes of the Vedas. This is regulated life. And then consciousness becomes elevated because the Vedas are meant to do that, to elevate consciousness. Progressively elevate consciousness through the modes of nature and into the realm of spiritual understanding and into the realm of understanding of the personality of Godhead. Or, once again, the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Notpadiyad yadi ratim shrama evahi kevalam. And if that isn't achieved, then from a transcendental perspective, it's a waste of time. I mean, it's a very strong thing to say, but from a transcendental perspective, it's a waste of time. Not a waste of time in the sense that it leads to elevation of the modes of nature. That much is good. But it's quite incomplete. And that means, incomplete means there's the pullings of the lower modes of nature all around us, and will be naturally infected by those lower modes of nature. That's a big risk. Especially in the human form of life. We have an important mission. So, let's see how far we get. I don't know how far I'm going to get. Chapter 25 is a very nice chapter. There's sections of it that are really... Maybe I'm going to spend more time looking at, take a series of verses and discuss a series of verses in groups. Something like that. This is like an introduction. So let's see if there's some comments, questions. You have a portable microphone. Very good.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question was, we always hear that the soul is situated in the heart, but when all of us, when we close our eyes, we see that our consciousness feeling is somewhere here. So how does that happen? Why is that we feel that me feeling is somewhere here, between the eyebrows?
I don't feel that.
Really?
Really?
Okay, how many here there are like, see, like, okay, right now when I closing is that me feeling that I exist is somewhere here. Is it different?
I don't feel that. You want to do a little survey? Go ahead. How many feel that feeling that he just described when you close your eyes?
So in the center of
we got to what you mean.
Yeah.
But I'm just asking, anyone feel that same feeling?
I feel thinking here, but I also feel feeling here.
Okay, so it's not like you're an oddball, but you're not the norm either.
Really? Wow.
So that's rather than what everybody feels, what about what you feel? You feel something. You want to know why you feel something, not why everybody feels something. Because it's not true that everybody feels that.
Okay.
Okay. I'll give you two answers.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of them are satisfying. One of them has to do with chakras.
Okay.
And that's one of the chakras, or energy centers. And it may be, it may not be, but it may be, this is why it's not satisfying, is it's a maybe. Maybe, that's a practice that you have done in the past, and therefore it's very easy for you, having done that practice in the past, to feel that feeling.
Okay. And probably I'm unaware of that practice.
You haven't told us about the practice, so you're probably unaware of it.
Yeah.
So, and it's a maybe. It's not like a definite, but something common experience is where there's repetition and repetition and repetition, it has to do with something from the past.
Right.
Whether it's good or bad, it could be something bad. Somebody has a tendency to steal. Somebody has a tendency for something. Means, it's been done in the past.
Okay.
That's just an experience of life, and it's stated in Bhagavad Gita. So that's a possibility for you. That's from the past practice. That's something that's very quick for you to attain.
Okay.
There's another one that there's this young American fellow that's been staying in the Chicago temple for some time now. He's from the suburbs of Chicago, but he's really into pranayama. Not chakras, he's into pranayama. So he was describing, he drove me to a program one evening. He was just like asking all about pranayama. I wasn't even asking, he was just telling. This is my experience. Then the last time, after this last Sunday feast, I was there. He was describing this experience from, he was lying in bed and he was kind of drifty. Then he thought came, I'm not breathing properly, so he started doing his breathing properly. Then he started having this vision, and he and this kind of like an out-of-body experience. And so, it's not something that our founder Acharya gave us, either chakra meditation or pranayama. It doesn't mean it's not valid or, significant. It's not the primary means, and therefore he didn't give us those things to do. So there's some power in those things. And, but it's not, that won't take one to Krishna. So whatever the reason is why he gets something special from breathing, he's just lying in bed and just like was practicing his pranayama, lying in bed. And he had a vision. And it was like, he really liked it. On the way over here, and riding in the car, there's somebody in New Jersey. When they chant and they close their eyes, they see this pinkish rose-colored color in their mind. And then it fades, and then it comes back, and then it fades, and it comes back. So they want to know, what's that? I said, it's asat. Asat. Meditate on the sound of Krishna's name. So whatever it was, whether it's seeing some color when you close your eyes, or feeling something, or feeling something when you breathe and had a vision or something, keep going. And when I was in this is like 53 years ago, there was a girl who was attending the same university that I was attending, and she liked LSD a lot. And she had really long hair that fell to the ground, and she would dance like, she was, every time there was kirtan, she was gone. And her question after every class was, when will I see Krishna? And so one of if I recall correctly, the president wrote to Prabhupada, how should I answer this girl? She always asked this question. And something like, this isn't verbatim, something like, don't worry, just keep chanting. Whatever's back there, the goal, what's in front of you is what's important. And what's important is making that connection with Krishna through his name, through sound vibration, through the Hari Katha or Krishna Katha, Bhagavad Katha, and Maya Sakta Manak Partha, absorbing the mind in Krishna. Whatever else happens along the way, that's okay. My advice to this devotee that was seeing a rose color It's apparently like iridescent, kind of like lovely looking color. But no, what is that? And it'll pass. It's a sat. And they'll go for sat. And how do you connect with sat? That's yoga. Through the primary means, the most effective means is through sound, and become absorbed in sound. And whatever else happens in between, keep going. Good or bad or mix or whatever it is. Keep going. Anyone else? Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You quoted from Bhagavad Gita, Manusyanam Sahasreshu. So it's very difficult or rare that somebody will know the Supreme Personality of Godhead in truth. And also in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami says one of the qualities of the devotional services is rarely achieved. If I remember
Pure devotional service.
Pure devotional services.
Pure devotional service.
Services rarely achieved.
No?
So,
what's our hope?
somebody who is looking...
That's
in my mind, thank you.
Well, our hope is that Krishna is very kind, and the connection with the cyclic succession itself is very rare. How many people have connection with the cyclic succession? That in itself is very rare. And one who takes, so the hope, it's Rupa Goswami's writing, hope against hope, is these two things. The descending mercy, that's far, 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 far. That's 5 fars. Far away from us. That goal or objective. But the potency of disciplic succession is far beyond our own capacity, and it's being given to us. So that's the hope. And that Krishna is very merciful. And if we just stay faithful, however long it takes to get there, just follow the path and we'll get there. With determination, with faith. You'll get there. One of the things that helps faith is look over your shoulder and see where you've come from. And the big distance has been covered from where we were when we started. La La Land somewhere. With some beliefs and some convictions and some goodness and some ignorance. And, a whole big mix of things. And we've come a long distance. And what's our qualification to come a long distance? Good fortune. And applying ourselves, at least, modestly. So what to speak if we take that modestly and dial it up a little bit? And when you dial it up a little bit, one of the things that's very clear is that's not sufficient. We need lots of mercy. So the eagerness to make that connection means more effort and more mercy. It's the combination of those two things. And that's where the hope is. Effort and mercy. And whatever it is that we attain, whatever it is, supposing it's 50%, next life 51%, or whatever it is, it's never lost. So that's another hope. The practice of bhakti is like a sine curve. It goes up. You're over here. It goes up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up, then it goes down. But over a period of time, the axis of its going up and down starts to slope. And the upper and lower limits also start to shrink, so it becomes more of a straight line. As, provided that there's some the proper kinds of practice. So with faith and with steady practice. What do you think? Sound okay? Is there hope? Okay. See?
So, somewhere else, you were saying there is a wave going up and down.
Yeah, that's
So-
our experience.
So your face probably is going down. That's the reason you're good.
No, the modes of nature can be acting differently at different times.
Okay.
It can, it can be a number of things. It can be our submission is slacking. It can be a number of things. But that's kind of standard procedure or standard experience. The unsteady bhakti, anishtata bhakti, there's hills and there's valleys. We just had a japa retreat in New Jersey, and we're going to have one coming up here. And those that get into it, there'll be some periods of time that'll be a hill, and sometimes it'll be a valley. And that's just in the course of one day. What to speak of time. Now sometimes it's like mostly down, sometimes it's mostly up, but one devotee described, he just lost track of time. He got into timelessness. And he felt he was floating, flying, 128 rounds. Anyway, and then other people, it was a struggle. For different reasons. You have something?
Hare Krishna. Guru Maharaj, an observation from Srila Prabhupada's lectures and general theme of him writing purports and books, that he takes or he gives example of some pure devotees more than others. For example, he talks more about Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruv Maharaj, versus like Nava Yogendra, Markandeya Rishi, Nimi, so different. So just observation. So is there a reason for him doing that, or is my observation wrong?
Your observation is right, and there could be a number of reasons. One obvious reason is the predecessor acharyas focus more on certain personalities than others. It's not that they're not knowledgeable about others, but they're particularly focused on certain personalities. Dhruva and Prahlad are two outstanding ones. Another reason might be, just like there's certain slokas that Prabhupada would refer to, like over and over and over and over. They were like, so that's a taste. He likes samosas made this way. So he serves samosas made this way. He had a liking for certain personalities in certain verses. Some of them aren't even in the Bhagavatam, without getting into it too much. With Dhruva, the verse that he would refer to almost always, is the verse from Hari Bhakti Sudadaya. It's not from the Bhagavatam. Swami Katartos Param Nyache, where Dhruva says to Lord Vishnu, before I was searching for a piece of broken glass, and now I've gotten this precious jewel, so I don't want anything. Not in the Bhagavatam, but he loved it. Or another one, when Vishvamitra Muni came to Dasarath's palace, the first words that Dasarath spoke, how are you doing in your quest for transcendence. There's a certain phrase in Sanskrit, and Prabhupada would say it over and over and over and over. He liked it. So that's another reason why he made some references. It resonated with him, he liked it, and he was fond of speaking about that which resonated with him. We're kind of like that too. So those are two big reasons why he would repeat certain personalities. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in Chaitanya Bhagavat, it is specifically said that Lord Chaitanya would hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day in Puri from Gadadhar Pandit, and he would hear the stories of Dhruva and Prahlad hundreds of times, again and again. So, Mahaprabhu also. There's many lessons embedded in those important lessons, these essence lessons. Something else? Anybody else? Comments, questions? You have something. You are online. Oh, okay.
Question from Sanchari.
Okay.
We say that devotional service continues in every life. We end at 51% and start at that point in our next life. I was wondering what that looked like, because material nature never disappears and Kali Yuga keeps...
Material nature never what?
Disappears.
Disappears.
And Kali Yuga keeps progressing.
Yes, it does.
Even if someone ends their current life at 99%, what would their next life need to look like to be fully Krishna conscious?
Well, sorry Sanchara, you can't dictate that one. Somebody else is going to. In other words, there could be n number of varieties of what it might look like. But there are principles that we know from Scripture that is likely to include, and that's birth in a family of devotees, where one gets nurtured to complete that process of bhakti. So likely, very elevated devotee parents one will take birth from. And then the elevated devotee parents will help one continue and complete. Is that it? Anything else? You have something.
So I have a follow-on question
To this one?
to this question.
Okay.
So let's say somebody has made really good progress,
Good.
right?
Okay.
And we hear about Tapalok near Brahmalok and
Yes,
all that.
Yes.
So, for example, if you are promoted to the Tapalok, there is very less disturbance that we find in the material universe,
That's
and you
right.
can do japa non-stop, right?
Non-stop.
So, is it possible that somebody who has maybe just 2% remaining to Krishna, they may get promoted to Tapalok and they can do sadhana undisturbed by the material nature?
It's certainly possible, but the function is a function of guna and karma, and there's an orchestrator of all of this, and that's the Supreme Lord. Maya Adhyakshena Prakriti. He is the Adhyaksha person. He oversees Prakriti. So whether it's Brahmaloka, Tapaloka, Maharloka, Satyaloka, what Prabhupada indicates is even better than the higher planets is birth in a devotee of families, a family of devotees. Birth in a family of devotees. And then, of course, there's gradations of devotees who are more advanced and less advanced. So the criterion is not where you take birth, but from what mother and father you take birth. The qualities and character of the mother and father from whom one takes birth. That's Prabhupada's indication. That's even better than birth in a higher planet. More fortunate, more advantageous. And so from from childhood. Or like Prahlad, even within the womb, hearing and hearing and hearing and hearing. And devotion, from the heart, the devotion of the mother and father. That was what Prabhupada attributed his success to, his father. So which is better, Tapaloka or being born as a son of Srila Prabhupada's father? I'll take that one. Anything else?
So Maharaj, you said...
Okay, microphone. I said,
Yeah, Maharaj.
he's got to put the button on.
Yeah, you said Sanchari, you cannot dictate it. So you are saying here it's no one can dictate what will happen. But so
In
Krishna-
principle, you can understand, but I know Sanchari. She wants to know more than principle. She wants to know what it's going to look like. That was her question. So, I can't say. No one can say. That's up to Krishna.
Up to
That
Krishna.
was my answer. But we can understand in principle, so I fell back on principle, which wasn't what she was asking, because I know her. She wanted, was it going to be green or pink or purple or blue or how tall and, what shade of each color. And she's,
Complete physical description.
yeah, that's what she's looking for. Okay, that was your question?
Yeah, Maharaj. So basically it's Krishna's who...
Krishna is going to decide. Karmana Daiva Netrena is decided by Daiva. Not otherwise.
So Maharaj, when Nanamrita Prabhu asked his question regarding, and you gave the answer about, you talked about faith and how you can increase faith. I guess this applies more to youth or young adults. But what's the solution to youth or young adults who've grown up in devotee families and they start losing faith once they reach a certain age due to traumatic experiences that come their way, whether it be family or something else? So how can they protect their faith?
Sadhu Sangha and Bhagavad Gita. Somebody sent me, one of my godbrothers sent me a little audio clip with a picture of Narada Muni zooming into Dwarka. So I can forward it to you, then you can forward it to the others who are here. But it goes something like this. This isn't verbatim. Prabhupada speaking. Prabhupada says, because of the intimate relationship between Narada and Krishna, he could speak in a familiar way. And Narada said to Krishna, "Oh, you favor the Pandavas, and yet they are in exile for so many years? You favor the Pandavas, and yet their wife, Draupadi, was nearly stripped naked in front of a public assembly? You love the Pandavas so much that they nearly died in a fire in a house of lac? This is how much you love your devotees?" Again, Prabhupada, because he was intimate relation with Krishna, he could speak like that. He wasn't criticizing. And he said, but the Pandavas, despite all these obstacles, their love for you simply grew and grew. This is the glory of the Pandavas. And then Prabhupada said, this is Krishna consciousness. Now, the opportunity of, back to your question, the opportunity of growing up in a devotee family, the fact that something happens that's extreme can be an opportunity, not a problem. It can be a problem, and it's seen as a problem. Look what happened to Prahlad. Look what happened to Dhruva. Look what happened to Haridas Thakur. Look what happened to many personalities. And the response is a free will response. It can be that the opportunity for taking deeper shelter is provided by Krishna, by some, you use the word trauma or trauma experience, but something that shakes you to the foundation. That can be terrible. It can also be a great opportunity. It can be a great opportunity in this sense, that you have no other shelter. Realistically, we don't have any other shelter. But we may think we have other shelters, like XYZ. Like good fortune, having taken birth in the family of devotees, or whatever. I happen to be good at playing mridanga, or I can memorize some Bhagavad Gita verses, or I have some, anyway, whatever the things are that we feel are shelters for us. But supposing you become paralyzed or something, anyway, supposing that something greatly unfortunate happens, it can shake your faith. That's bad in one sense, and it's good in another sense, because who am I? What's my place of real shelter? And you emerge out of that ash of the bad experience, and you come out transformed. So my answer to you was Sadhu Sangha and Bhagavad Gita. And if you have that faith, read, I invite you, read Antya Lila chapter 4. It's Sanatana Goswami being parikshita, examined by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, putting him into a very, very, it's three varies now, very difficult circumstance. He wanted to give up his life, but Chaitanya forbid him. Said, you can't go back to Godhead that way. If it was so easy, we'd all go jump in front of the wheel of Jagannath cart. That's not how you get liberated. You've given your life to me, and I have plans for this body. You can't take it. You can't take the property of a Brahmin. Shame on you. Anyway, it's a nice chapter. You read it carefully with the thought of how can it help you answer that question you just asked. You have shelter, and it's a matter of recognizing it. And when the other shelters are taken, you don't have other shelters anymore. So it's a faith builder instead of a faith shatterer. It's an opportunity rather than simply a challenge. And life is like that. Not just you, all of us. We all have our opportunities to get smashed, and then look what's left, and see who we are. Here's a little statement that's in Krishna book. It's one sentence long. The context of the statement is Bhrigu Muni was assigned by other sages to find out who's the greatest. So he decided to first test Lord Brahma, his father, first Lord Shiva, his brother, then Brahma, his father, then Vishnu. So it was mental, verbal, and then corporeal offense. And when he kicked Vishnu in the chest, Vishnu apologized. Gee, I hope I didn't hurt your foot. I have such a hard chest. You have such a soft foot. So Prabhupada writes, the greatness of a person can be examined based upon how they respond to difficulties that they face. That's not exactly what he wrote, but it's something very close. That's why Brego determined when there's hardship, and how do you respond to that hardship? Where is your shelter? That's my answer to your question. Look closely at what your real shelter is, and when you're asking that question, you may not have the answer so quickly, but sadhu sangha, or just say association with wholesome friends and superiors, and Bhagavad Gita, because there's potencies in the Srimad Bhagavatam that can carry you to the right place and lift you. It's a fact. I mean, Kirtan can do that too, but Bhagavad Gita. You have something? No.
I was just thinking about Vritrasura Maharaj when you said. I was thinking of Vritrasura Maharaj when you said.
Vritrasura Maharaj, huh? Go ahead.
Being born in a devotee family, upon if they are not able to complete their devotional service, and that's a different example where he was not born in a devotee family, nor was he. I mean, he did not have elevated birth. So was Gajendra. Yet Krishna was very merciful.
You're kind of mixing things up, but that's okay. Vritrasura, who was he the son of? Prashta. And was Prashta a devotee? He was a yogi. Mystic yogi. He wasn't especially a great devotee. I mean, if he was a great devotee, he wouldn't have done what he did. He was not a great devotee.
That's precisely my point.
Oh. So then how was Vritrasura exalted? Vritrasura was exalted due to his past life's association with Narada Muni and Angira Muni, but mainly Narada Muni. And that stayed with him until his next life. That was your point?
Yes.
Okay. And he didn't take birth in Tapaloka either. I'm pulling his leg. Okay, I think that's it. Anything online? We're done. Srila Prabhupada ki? I brought some Mahaprasadam. I have several boxes of Mahaprasadam in the refrigerator. Here's one of them right here.